On today's episode of Chronicles of a Nigerian Woman, I'll be reading Boma's story. I'm not usually one to speak up, but I need to air my mind and hopefully get some advice on how to handle things. I grew up in relative wealth and comfort. I won't say we were very rich, but we lived above average. I did not realize this until I went to a federal boarding school and found that what I thought was a regular lifestyle was well above the average that most people had. For the stipulated food items we were allowed to bring to school, for example, my mom not only gave me big sizes of everything, but she gave me 2 of each. And in her words, I had to learn to manage. Her idea of me managing was about 4 times what the average person brought, and others could not even afford to complete the basic things on the list. I was the firstborn, and my immediate younger brother was born 8 years after me, when my parents had almost given up on having other children. They had 1 more girl after him, and so we were 3 children, but I was in a different world from my siblings. My mother ran a luxury fashion business, and my dad was an investment banker who was about 7 years older than she was. Ours was a close-knit family, and we lived in an estate where my parents had several friends. From what I heard, my dad and some of his friends, about 10 of them, put money together early in their careers to buy land in an upcoming area of Lagos. They bought about 30 large plots, took 2 each, and kept the other 10 for investment. Then they sold them years later when the prices were high. The original 10 people still lived in the estate, and most of the people they sold the other plots to were acquainted with one or some of them. So it was like a closed group where everyone knew everyone. We mostly went to the same schools, attended each other's birthday parties, etc. At that time, it was quite common for even children of the wealthy to go to federal schools. And so boarding school was my first experience interacting with people outside my community. And it changed my perspective on life as I got to know people from all strata of life and interact with them without pride or prejudice. Some of them had more than we did, and many had far less, but in school, it became a secondary consideration in making and building friendships. After secondary school, my parents considered the option of sending me abroad for university education, but they eventually decided that it would be better for me to finish my first degree in Nigeria and then leave the country for further studies when I would be more mature. Everything was going according to plan until I met Richard in my final year at the University of Lagos. He was also in his final year studying engineering, so he was technically a year ahead of me because I was studying banking and finance, which was a 4-year course. I didn't know him, but he walked up to me one day and told me that he had been watching me for over a year and wanted to be friends. He did not ask for anything more, just friendship. I was a chatty and friendly person, and so it was no problem for me to make friends with him. He soon implanted himself into my group of friends. I had 3 close friends that I shared an apartment with, and he soon became good friends with all of them separately and as a group. I don't know how he did it, but that was typical Richard. Friendly, winsome, and extremely charming. It was they who advocated for me to date him, even though I didn't need too much persuasion myself. Richard was a very intense lover, very expressive and focused on me, but not in a bad way though. He did not make me feel clustered, and he was not overbearing, but he was very present and deeply involved. It was not long before he was fully installed into every facet of my life. He did not come from a wealthy background at all. He was the second of 3 children, and his parents struggled to see him through school. Most times, he hustled to make ends meet after they managed to pay his school fees. But you wouldn't have known it if he didn't tell you. He dressed well and never looked sad or down. And he had very big dreams too, about the kind of job he would get, the kind of lifestyle he would live, how he would take care of his parents financially, and all that. He was one of the most optimistic people I knew. Richard never asked me or anyone for money directly, but somehow, people always felt moved to support him. When we started dating, I gave him a fixed amount from my allowance every month, and he was always so grateful. He bought me small but meaningful gifts, and he wrote me poems and letters. He was that kind of person. He was also very, very smart. My parents got to meet Richard on our graduation day. My mom liked him immediately. I think she was taken by his charm. My dad, on the other hand, was a lot more skeptical about him, and he told me so. As far as he was concerned, Richard seemed a bit too smooth for him. He was too much of a charmer. When he asked me about Richard's background and I told him, my dad was convinced that he was more interested in me because of my family background than for anything else. Of course, I got upset, and my dad ended up having to appease me, although he insisted that he was not comfortable with Richard. My dad was not a snooty person, so I trusted him, but I felt he was wrong about Richard, so he agreed to give him a chance. My dad was able to arrange for me to be posted to Lagos for my youth service, and when I appealed to him to help Richard too, he agreed, albeit reluctantly. Richard was able to get himself posted to a large engineering firm that paid him well during that year, and so began his upward trajectory because he was retained there after completing his youth service. After that year, I wanted to stay in the bank where I served so that I could remain in Nigeria and be close to Richard. But my dad put his foot down and insisted that I at least stick with my plan of going for my master's degree and certification. The original goal was that I would stay back abroad, but that part was obviously gone now. I had no choice, so I went for 2.5 years and came back with a master's in international finance and a CFA certification. Of course, I came home thrice in between so that I could see Richard. We got married about 9 months after I got back. I know my dad wasn't too excited about the wedding, but he said it was my choice to make. Richard was doing very well at his job and was preparing to be sent to Germany for a 6-month posting around the time of our wedding. He was earning very well. He had moved his parents to a good place and set up a business for his mom. He had also rented a very nice apartment not too far from where I grew up. I felt it was a bit too expensive, but he insisted that he could afford it. It felt more like proving a point to me. It was not just the apartment. I felt as though the influx of money into Richard's hands had raised his taste exponentially. He bought expensive designer clothes, a luxury car that he was making monthly payments for, etc. It seemed as though he just needed to show that he now had money. At first, it wasn't such a big deal. I spoke to him about it and he kept insisting in his charming manner that it was fine and he would handle things. We agreed to have a joint account where we would put an equal amount of money for household expenses and projects, and then the rest of our income would be for each person's discretionary spending. I'm grateful for that decision because otherwise we would have been poor. Richard has done very well in his career and he earns a lot of money. But over the years, he has barely been able to keep his end of the financial deal. Most months, he either cannot make his contribution or he has to borrow from me after doing so to meet other obligations. He buys the most expensive things without caution, and he has no financial plan at all. It's ironic that I help other families who earn far less than we do with planning their finances towards long-term freedom and wealth, while my family is struggling. Well, not quite, because I have made plans for my children and me, but at great cost to my present comfort. I deny myself so much while my husband spends lavishly, and it is really frustrating. Even with my family wealth and upbringing, I do not live the kind of ostentatious lifestyle my husband lives. I cannot tell my father because he warned me, but I think he has an idea. Richard's family seem not to care about anything except what they can get from him. His parents are always asking for one thing or the other, and he happily supplies even if he has to borrow. We have lived this way for 11 years. I have personal investments, but to be honest, most of the family projects and investments were funded by me. I have records of how much Richard has borrowed or promised to pay back over the years, and of course, he never pays back, nor do I think he will ever be able to. The thing is, I'm considering removing his name from those investments. After all, I set them up, and the money came from me. Richard trusts me to the extent that he never bothered to sign off on anything. I created a signature for him, and I sign off on both our names. I am seriously contemplating signing everything over to myself. Will I be doing anything wrong if I do? It's my money. You may say I'm betraying his trust, but he has also betrayed my trust several times, and he does not show any signs of stopping. I don't see why he should enjoy the fruits of my labor without any consequences for his own actions. What advice do you have for Boma? Please share in the comments below. Remember to look around my channel for other interesting videos, to like this video and to share it with somebody else. And definitely don't forget to click that subscribe button. You can join the Valiant Women's community, which is a vibrant community of women where we share experiences and go through various learning sessions and other interesting activities that enhance us as women. The link is in the description below. Till I come your way next time. Ciao!